Help me welcome Caley Porter. She is a wife of nearly 18 years. She's the mom of 4 and a woman whose story is marked by unexpected miracles and a whole lot of joy. She and her husband Jay, who pastors Life Church in Kansas City, Missouri, were once told that they had a less than 3% chance of having children. Did you hear that? Less than 3% chance. And did you also hear she has 4 children? This is an amazing story. That news at the age of 24, though, it kicked off a journey for them that was filled with a lot of hard moments, but also a lot of faith, hope, and surprises they'll never forget. These days, Caley wears a lot of hats. She's a homeschooling mom, a toddler-chasing floor dweller, and a business owner. She helps lead the Senior Health Advocates, which is a family-run company in Florida, serves Medicare clients with the heart and integrity. Whether she's hosting Zoom meetings from a coffee shop or juggling the chaos of everyday life, Caley is passionate about helping people find beauty in those hard places and purpose in every day. Welcome, Caley.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie. This is going to be fun.
This is going to be fun. And what I so love, you guys, I've known Caley since she was a little girl, and I was honored several years ago now. She interviewed me for her podcast, which was my first experience into the podcasting world. So this is just such a treat to get to kind of turn the tables and interview her today. I know you guys are going to just love Caley as much as I do. So Caley, we want to hear some of your story. It's just so beautiful. It's been such a joy to watch you over the years, and I just know it's going to be so encouraging to our listeners. So, would you like to start with telling us a little about your journey to motherhood?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I think, Stephanie, when I interviewed you, I made the comment that if someone that was struggling with infertility would have seen you in the grocery store, they would have never known how just heavy your story really was, and what all the twists and turns that your story's taken. And I feel like now I'm on that side too. If someone saw me in the grocery store, they would never know that struggling was part of it.
Yes.
Jay and I got married very young, so we started. It was in 2010. We had been married for a few years. And so we started trying to get pregnant. And within a few months, the excitement wore off, and we were like, what's going on? And at a year, we were in the middle of a doctor's office, and we heard that we had less than a 3% chance of having children naturally. And that was mainly due to male factor issues. They knew that I probably had some issues with my family history with endometriosis, and they figured that was going to be the case, but they were like, there's no point in getting to your issues when it stops here. The buck stops here at Jay. Yeah. And so less than 3%. And that was actually with doing an IUI treatment, which is kind of a low level. They said that they were encouraging us not to do IUI because it would only be a 3%. So even naturally it was going to be less than that. So that kind of threw us into this infertility world, trying to pursue treatments, trying to figure out what we should do. And in our early 20s, the treatments were big dollar signs. They still are. But even in your early 20s, it was there was no way. And so it was pretty discouraging just to feel like we were never going to be able to really get there. And so it was in 2013, we decided that we were going to have to recruit help financially if we were going to do this. So I started a side business to try to raise some money. And with that, I went public, as they say, went public with our story. And at the time, I didn't know anyone doing that. It was very scary, very much felt like we were stepping out on a limb here. And putting our story and exposing ourselves. But I was actually a really beautiful part of that story, which we can get into. But that started in 2013. In 2014, we found out, miracle of miracles, that we were pregnant naturally. I thought I had stomach ulcers. I thought I had the flu. And then when I started puking every morning, someone was like, you really should take a pregnancy test. And I was like, I'm not pregnant. And they were like, just take a test. And I was pregnant. And we were shocked to our core, because that was not supposed to happen. So it took several months for us people were like, oh, did you cry? Were you just so blown away? And we were like, no, we just literally were in shock. I think it took months for us to recognize that this was actually real. I said when we had Emma in 2014, whenever we had her in the hospital, I looked at Jay and I was like, I just feel like someone's going to come in here and take her, because this can't be ours. It was just such a gift. And so I thought that was going to be kind of the end of our infertility story, because we had a baby. And so I probably thought that the desires to that if I have one, that I won't struggle with all of those negative feelings. I probably thought that too, but I also just thought that if we had one, we're going to have, so many more. And at the time that was not the case. We tried to start getting pregnant again when Emma was a year old, and that did not happen. We had actually, in the process of her being a year old and us starting to try, I had already stopped doing the blog because I felt like I kind of had lost my voice there. But whenever I could not get past just the desire to encourage women, in one of the seasons when we were doing some treatments to try to get pregnant with number 2, and we got a negative result. We did an IUI round actually, and it was really one of those moments that we had kind of written the story for God, like this would be like the perfect thing, Lord. Like someone came forward with the money, the calendar worked out perfectly within our schedule, which is kind of a big deal when you're trying to conceive. It's like, if you can't just walk in on a Tuesday, like it's, there's all these things with being at the doctor at this time. And I was like, Lord, this is perfect. So we've really set you up here so this is going to be a cool story that we'll be able to share. And it did not take, it failed. And when I found out that news, I was actually alone on a plane and I was so devastated. And I just started looking through the podcasts and I was like, I just need truth. I need something in my ears that I don't have to search for. It can just pour in easily. And I could not find anything. And I just had this like thought from the Holy Spirit that was like, well, go be that voice, go do that thing. And I did not want to do that because a lot of reasons, but honestly, the first thought that came to my mind is I had a kid in 9th grade tell me that I sounded like a man when I spoke, when I opened my voice, I raised my hand. He was like, you sound like a man. And I was like, I can't have my voice on video or on audio. So it took like 6 months to overcome that fear, but thankfully I did. But in the process of doing that, the Lord just really, I mean, it's just so healing, hearing other people's stories and processing that with them and leaning into the Lord through that season. And so that's when the podcast was born that you were on, Joy and Infertility. And it just became a really special time for me specifically. But in the process of that, we were actually Jay and I were recording our story for the first time together. And this had been about 4 years since Emma was born, and 3 years since we had been trying. And Jay said on the podcast, he was like, I don't remember exactly what he said, but he made a comment that I was like, you know what, he's right. And so when we were done talking, I went in the bedroom and he was in the other room on the recording, and I was like, hey, I think I'm done doing these treatments. Like, it's not a healthy thing for me to wake up every morning and take an ovulation test. And like, that's the first thing I think about every morning is I've failed or I've succeeded in my goal. And it just was not a good space for me. So I was like, can we just be done? And he was like, I agree. Let's just be done. And so we did that. But what we didn't realize is that actual medication that we were on that month for the kind of the Hail Mary $2 medication, let's see if this works. We were actually pregnant when we had that conversation and we didn't know. And that was Grantham, our number 2. And so once again, just a miracle. I mean, we had there in the process of those 3 years, I'm trying to like get through the story because it's just a long story. Jay actually had a surgery in 2017, the year before we got pregnant with Grantham, to remove a cluster of veins that blocked sperm production. He had that surgery on January 2nd. And on February 1st, I was in the hospital having surgery because through all the monitoring that I was doing, they had found a tumor on my right ovary, and they had to remove the tumor, but it actually took my right ovary with me. So we literally took a step forward and then took a step back. And it was pretty devastating to us at that time because the doctors were just like geeking out that it was this really cool tumor that they found. They were trying to show us pictures, and we were like, no, thank you. Like, this is pretty bad news for us. So there was a lot of steps to get to that point with Grantham, but we got there and the Lord gave us another gift. And so continuing on, we thought that it takes us 3 to 4 years to get pregnant. And so when he was about 6 months old, he crawled in front of me and I looked at Jay and I was like, all right, I'm ready to start trying. Cause in 3 years, like I'm not done with babies. Like they're too special. And so we started trying, and we found out when Grantham turned 11 months old that we were pregnant. And so I think that was the beginning of us realizing that we were in a different season with our journey.
It is so beautiful. I love the way God intervened and had some beautiful surprises for you guys.
Yep. And then we actually have 4, like you said. So Landry was just a couple years old and we started trying again, and he came just as quick. I made a comment to a friend. I was like, yeah, we struggled to have kids, and she like leaned in and she was like, I don't think you can say that anymore. Like, you're right. The Lord has definitely performed some serious miracles, and we've experienced some healing, not only spiritually, but physically as well. And so they are all so special, but that journey I went through so many, just going back, Stephanie, and like reliving those days, trying to prepare for this episode. Oh man, I dealt with so much anger and bitterness and jealousy, and the Lord just worked through all of those things. to really kind of to get my heart settled at a better place before the kids came. Thankfully, I really am thankful that that happened before on the other side of it.
Absolutely. And dealing through those emotions, that applies to all of us, regardless of it's related to childbearing or whatever our stories are, because as you said, sharing our stories is so healing. And when people hear, like you just shared, that you've worked through some of those really difficult emotions, those alone are very, very encouraging to people, because there's people that are stuck in that part of their story. And it's good to know that you've gotten to the other side of that.
Yeah, I feel like infertility is a trigger. There's a lot of hard things going on with us all the time. And infertility happened to be the trigger for me. That was like, hey, do you really believe what you believe? Or is this just something you're saying? But that may not be infertility for some people. It may be a bad diagnosis, or it may be something going on in their marriage, or maybe later on in life with your grown children or kids get a bad diagnosis. There's always a trigger. And I feel like if we don't deal with the heart issues, I felt this very strongly with infertility. If I didn't deal with the heart issues that were being triggered, they were just going to come up later on in motherhood, and they absolutely have. Those trust issues that we have with our Father, they come up no matter if you have kids or not have kids. It doesn't make it easier, the fact that there's a baby in your arms, if you don't trust the Lord earlier.
Very true. It's really like he does want us to learn those lessons, and he gives us multiple opportunities and avenues to learn them, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, and I just didn't want to waste it, and I've still had to learn them
Yeah.
over and over again, but I just really didn't want to waste the hard season of the waiting.
Me too. I'm right there with you. Learning hard lessons. I mean, even currently, it's just a part of life. I believe it's all the way throughout life, because when you talk to people of all ages, if they're honest with you, they'll tell you they're struggling with something, or they've just gotten through something. So it's true. We just have to be willing and lean in and learn what it is he's trying to teach us,
Yeah.
So very true. So you did go on to have your fourth, and I did hear you say there was a story about going public. What was that story like for you?
Like I said, no one was doing it, and so I knew of that was in my circle. I don't think Instagram algorithms existed back in 2013 maybe, and so it wasn't like, hey, we see you searching infertility stuff, we're gonna feed you with all of the infertility people that are being open with their stories. It wasn't that. So I had no idea that people were talking about this, and so as we were pastors, young, newly married, I mean, everyone had an opinion, everyone had a comment that they always would say, and they had no idea what we were struggling with. And so people were saying things all the time to us, and it was so hurtful, and they had no idea that they were being so hurtful. And so for us, whenever we thought about going public, I just thought I was going to like expose this big wound, and people were going to continue to be more hurtful. But what actually happened was, when we went public, I exposed the wound, and then people could see the wound, and they were like, oh my gosh, let's help you heal. Let's be more careful with the words that we say, which is helpful for all of us. And so I was shocked at how almost immediately my outlook changed on the people in our lives. I felt more supported. I felt more seen with, even in the Lord. It was like he was showing me like, hey, my people can love you in this hard season too. You don't have to be scared of them. And I mean, it makes sense. If you're hiding a wound, people are going to bump into you, but when you expose it, they're going to be more careful, and they're going to try to help you recover and, support you. And that's exactly what happened. So sharing our story was one of the best things. And I know that's not the case for everyone. I don't know of too many people, though, in all my interviews that have went public and shared their story that have ever regretted it. I don't know if I know one.
Yeah, I was about to agree with you in that, because my experience has been that too. Anytime that we bring something to the light, it's so true. It's like God just, instead of trying to cover it or isolate or whatever other coping mechanism that we use, we bring it to the light. Other people, obviously, they kind of start coming out of the woodwork to support you usually, those people who genuinely love you and care about you. And then also, it's almost like the actual process of bringing it to the light itself is healing, because you're not having to suppress it and hold it down anymore.
And it takes the power away from it. I mean, that happens all the time with sin in our life. The more we keep our sin quiet, the more power it holds over us, because the enemy wants us to feel alone and isolated, and like you're the only one. And the second that you confess your sin, you're able to, it kind of loses its luster, it loses its power, and you're like, I'm not even enticed by that anymore. And I felt like the same thing with our story. As soon as we shared it, the weight and the power that it had over me was just like gone immediately. And I felt so much lighter. Oh my gosh, it was amazing.
Yes, it's so true. So true. And then, the thing that's beautiful is not only does it help you to share your story, but it helps other people to hear your story. So it's a win-win, really. It's kind of a beautiful way to heal. I do group coaching. I don't know if you've known that, but that's what I have witnessed in that is how amazing hearing someone else's story, knowing what they've overcome, and being in a safe place you can share your story. It's amazing the way God works within that. It's almost like he really meant what he said about carrying each other's burden.
Right?
Yeah.
Be power to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I also was going to ask you, what do you attribute how you got through some of those hard days during the waiting time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like when I look back on that journey, I feel like there were multiple kind of cornerstone moments that either shifted our trajectory completely or just was like a small pivot and it made a big difference. And there were three specific moments that I felt like kind of did that for me. One of them was sharing. That was huge. If you're a believer and you're struggling with something, I feel like that's such a good first step. Just go talk to some people about it. Do not keep it to yourself. Because there's just so much power in that. But the other thing that happened, it actually happened before I went public, because no one knew this. Facebook was like the bread and butter of social media back then. And so it was nothing for me to get on and see. I mean, one day I saw 9 pregnancy announcements from my friends within my circle or my church. And I mean, people were having their seconds and thirds in the process. People were having twins. One sweet family who I love to death, they had 2 sets of twins. And I was like, Lord, I can't get one. Anyway, so seeing those stories was hard. And there was one moment where my really good friend who I worked with actually, she was with me in a moment where I got very angry. I had heard an announcement and I was alone. I felt safe with her because she did know. And I was just crying and just saying some really terrible things. And she listened very sweetly and very quietly. I think if I would have heard myself, I would have probably yelled at myself, but that's just where I was. I was very raw and very wrong in some of the things that I was saying. And so she, in that moment, she let me talk and then she was like, hey, I want to share something with you. And you may not be in this moment right now. You may not be ready for this right now, but I just want you to hear it. And then later on, maybe you can relate to this. And she talked about how she was, her and her husband had been trying to sell their house. They were in ministry and they were trying to get closer to the church. And she said every time that she would see, they had it on the market for like months. And she was like, I keep seeing these sold signs on houses that just went up, or somebody will post on Facebook, like, my house was only on the market for a day and it's already sold. And, praise the Lord. And she's like, here I am, this is our flesh, right? Here I am giving my life to the Lord and like serving him. And yet I can't sell my house in order to do that better. Like, what in the world? Why aren't you doing this for me, Lord? And she said that she really felt convicted that the Lord was telling her, when you see that house sell, when you hear that person say that, I want you to thank God for the fact that they don't have to carry that burden and that I have answered their prayer. And I want you to show gratitude for them on behalf of what I've done for them. And she's like, so I know this is about a house and it's not about having a baby. I know that's a deeper pain point for you. But just consider that as you hear these announcements, like maybe you could shift that. Just saying those words might help. And so, of course, I didn't receive it at that day, but several weeks later, I did. I started doing that, and it was a game changer because not only when you walk through the trying to conceive world as you have, and you have issues and miscarriages and loss and struggles, you start to realize how actually miraculous a birth is, or conception is. Like, it is. That anyone could conceive a child is a miracle, because there's so many things that have to go into it. And so anytime I would see that announcement or somebody would share that with me, I would just instantly, even if I didn't feel it, I would instantly go to the gratitude. Thank you, Lord, for that. Thank you for that gift to them. And it was just enough of a shift that it kind of got me out of that lane of anger and bitterness pretty quickly, just out of like muscle memory. I had to be grateful. That was going to be my first response, was gratitude. The second thing that I really wanted that kind of came to me was, I know hope is like a big part of your podcast. I don't know if hope would have been the word that I would have used that I had back then. It wasn't a lack of hope or deferred hope, but it was just, I think what I had to land on in the hard days was contentment of where I was. And so one of the things that really convicted me was the question, if I never get this thing that I want so bad, is he enough? Are you still a good father? Can I still trust you if you never give me what I want, which you said I should have this? Am I going to be okay with that? And so I had to land on choosing over how I felt, choosing to trust. And so on the days when I was having a hard time or when I got a bad call, I had to choose to trust that even if I never get this, you are still good. You still love me, and I still trust you. And so I choose to trust really was kind of became my mantra through all of it. Even through this, after I had Emma and trying to pursue it again, choosing to trust when my feelings didn't allow it or didn't want me to do that. That's what I had to do. And so that was a huge shift for me, was landing on that.
Yeah. That's beautiful because it talks about how we're supposed to take our thoughts captive. And I believe that's what, when you were choosing that thought that I'm going to trust instead of the other kind of downward spiral types of thinking that can clearly happen in a situation like this, you were just exercising that by taking your thoughts captive, renewing your mind, lining it up with, his word rather than our own downward spiral type thoughts, So great illustration. Yep. Now, you were mentioning too, like the idea about a shift. I loved how you said it was just a shift, a tiny shift. It wasn't like you like jumped into the gratitude part, or it was like an easy or a huge thing. It was a baby step, which pun intended, towards feeling grateful.
Going public was slightly more than a baby step.
Yeah,
That was a leap.
sure. Yes.
But the other two were just little shifts. Yeah.
Yes. I like to point that out because there could be listeners that are thinking that they have to do something monumental to make these changes that make a difference in their heart and in their experiences that they're going through. But yet, really, it can be very subtle and very tiny, can also make a huge difference. Well, let me just ask you, it's amazing that we're sitting here, both of us having stories that we've gone through that were very challenging to become mothers, and yet such a place of gratitude that we honestly walk in now. And both of us also homeschool moms. Funny story is, when Caley was much younger, I actually taught her writing for a little period of time. Isn't that ironic?
But that is not surprising.
Yeah, it's kind of neat actually. So, and I've just known her family forever and loved all of them. So I just wanted to ask you though, are there anything, like when you look back now, any books, resources, podcasts that have been encouraging to you along this walk that you've gone through?
Oh, there's a lot. Specifically with infertility, one of the books that stands out, it's called Empty Womb, Aching Heart. It was one of the first books that I read. I actually don't know of that many books specifically to this, but it was my podcast. It was a story of someone who had walked through it, and then it was someone wrapping it up with truth. And it was like every story ended with just like hope and truth and contentment, and they were all very short. And so anytime I was struggling, I could open it up. And I mean, I think 4 years is a long time, but these women were like women who had waited 15, 20 years, who had never had children, and they were still content, and they were still joyful. And so that was a huge help for me. But I remember the book with the Women of Christmas talked a lot about the birth of Jesus and how there were 3 women's fertility journeys surrounding that: Mary, Elizabeth, and Anna, I don't know which emphasis to put it on. But that was really powerful. I got a lot out of that, probably just because I was in such a place that I was grasping for everything. And I loved that book. I read it every year just to reiterate that. Circle Maker by Mark Batterson. I mean, there's so many great prayer books. But podcast wise, I didn't have any infertility podcasts, but I know that Sarah's Laughter is one now that I found, Hope in the Waiting. So there's lots of great. But then motherhood, I mean, the shelves are overflowing with those books. I'm obsessed with reading and podcasts, and I have a long list of a lot of great things.
One that stands out, a podcast or book that you really think is just a game changer?
So if you have kids, Sissy Goff, do you know her? She's a counselor in Nashville. Sissy Goff and David Thomas. So David Thomas and her are both counselors at Daystar Counseling Ministries, and I am a huge fan of them. They're Christian counselors, and they specifically work with kids. And so their Instagram is a full resource in and of itself. And they've written so many books. They've written books, like Sissy's written a book to girls that are like that 10, 11, 12 age. But they really talk a lot about like anxiety in parents and anxiety in children, and how to work through everything that we're talking about, like taking your thoughts captive. And it's just really good. And then David Thomas does the boy version of all of that, and he talks about how to raise emotionally strong boys, and just giving them language instead of the anger that normally comes out, and just they just understand their brains a lot better than I do. So I have learned so much, and they have a podcast as well. They are very well rounded.
I will have to look them up. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. with me personally, but also with our listeners, because it's always good to have those good resources. And like you said yourself, when you were beginning this journey, you really created a podcast. And so that's still out there for people as well. The Joy in Infertility. Yeah.
It is.
Now, is there anything you would like to share with us specifically? Just anything that God's been teaching you lately?
Goodness, yeah. I feel like I'm in a whole nother round of choosing to trust, which is kind of what we talked about earlier. We don't really overcome. These aren't lessons that we learn and put away on the shelf like, check that off, we're done. Thank you, Lord. Otherwise, pride would be a significant issue, right?
Yes.
But yeah, having to learn to choose to trust in the seasons of waiting, in a different season of waiting that has nothing to do with our kids, but just in our season of life, and just really having to, asking Him, can you please give me the full picture here? I would really appreciate that. But having to trust that He's just going to give us the next step.
Yeah.
He's just going to give us direction for the next step and the next choice. And so, but yeah, we don't really overcome these ever. We just, I feel like we move from, what is the scripture? We move from faith to faith. I mean, I felt like I really did good choosing to trust Him in the infertility. And now this isn't harder by any means. It's just a different season. And so it's like, oh yeah, the same truth actually applies.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's great when we get to carry lessons that we've learned previously into a new season. And even though it may be different circumstances, at least we have a tiny little bit of muscle memory there, maybe, that we can rely on, pull that trust back up and really.
We have the experience or the stories. I mean, it's just like the Israelites, putting those rocks, there for generations to come. We have those in our own life now. We have our own rocks. We have our own monuments to go, look what He did. And He's going to do it again.
That's right. Yes. And you know what? And your kids are watching that too. That's one of the beautiful parts about the journey and the season that you're in, is now your kids get to see you walk this out. And they get to also experience some element of choosing to trust,
Yep.
So. Now, if you would share with us, I just know there's some little glimmer of hope or something that you would like to leave the listeners with. Could you share that?
Yeah, I think, like we said, infertility is a trigger. So if you're listening and infertility is not your thing, we all have those things in our life that we're dealing with, that we're in the middle of waiting for an answer to prayer, or waiting for, this thing to happen, or us to receive an answer. And I think reminding myself in what we're dealing with is that there is a lot of beauty to be found in the wait. I think when we set our sights on the end result of our prayer, or the child that we are so desperately wanting, we think that's our answer, but our answer isn't actually that. Our answer is actually found in Jesus, and the hope and the joy and the peace that comes in Him and our relationship with Him. And so in the wait, I used to say on the podcast, there's a lot of beauty to be born through this journey. And so no matter what you're waiting for, you're praying for, just lean in to Him. And, you can have anger and bitterness and jealousy all you want, but you are not going to get any faster to your answer or your miracle.
That's right.
By having all those things. Now, you're not going to get there any faster if you have hope and joy and peace, but you will get there. You'll go longer, you'll be able to go farther, and your relationship with Jesus will be so much sweeter because of that. And I feel like whenever you and if you're married, if your husband and you are both submitted to the same things, that your marriage is going to get stronger through the hard stuff. It doesn't have to get worse. It can get stronger.
That's true.
If you're both committed and submitted to the Lord in that season. And so our relationship with God gets better and our marriages get stronger. I mean, there is a lot of beauty. So if you're in the wait, just lean into that a little bit more and find out what God has for you there in that season of waiting.
That is so well said. And I think it's going to really help our listeners because, as you said, it's really the journey that we're on and what God's doing in us through that journey. It's not just that end result that we're looking for and praying so fervently for. It's really the whole story. And then it's kind of like that answered prayer, whatever way He chooses to answer it, that is like the icing on this cake that He's making, or this journey that He's giving us. It's been so fun catching up and chatting with you today, and I just love all that God is doing in your life. It's just so beautiful to see it from the outside looking in, Caley, and I believe it's going to bless the listeners today. So I just thank you for sharing. I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and encourage us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie.